at 9:17 a.m. on January 22nd, 1943. Second Lieutenant John George crouched inside the shattered remains of a Japanese bunker west of Point Cruz. The humid air clung to his skin, and the smell of rotting vegetation mixed with gunpowder hung through the jungle. His eyes were fixed on a banyan tree 240 yards away, watching through a rifle scope that most of his fellow officers had laughed at for 6 weeks. George was 27 years old, an Illinois state champion, a man with 0 confirmed kills, but now 11 Japanese snipers haunted the groves near Point Cruz. In just 72 hours, they had killed 14 men from the 132nd Infantry Regiment. Fear spread faster than malaria. Every morning, another body came back from the trees. The other officers mocked his rifle from day one. A Winchester Model 70. A civilian bolt-action rifle with a Lyman Alaskan scope. They called it a toy. A mail-order sweetheart. A deer gun, The Army wanted everyone carrying Garons. Heavy, semi-automatic, military standard. But George had spent 2 years of National Guard pay on his rifle. When the regiment shipped out, the rifle hadn't arrived on time. It followed him weeks later, packed in cosmoline, delivered in a wooden crate marked fragile. The battalion armorer joked, "Is this for deer? Or Germans?" George had only answered, "For the Japanese." For weeks he carried the rifle against direct orders. Even through the brutal fighting for Mount Austin, a 16-day battle that left hundreds wounded and dozens dead. Yet through all of it, he had never fired a single shot with the Winchester. Not once, but now things had changed. Japanese snipers dominated the groves. They hid in banyan trees, giant pillars of wood rising 90 feet into the sky. They moved at dawn, then sat invisible all day, killing silently, patiently, relentlessly, on the night of January 21st. After 3 more American soldiers were shot, one through the neck from a tree they had passed twice. The battalion commander finally summoned George. He didn't want excuses. He wanted results. Could George's toy rifle actually hit anything? Could he hunt snipers who had already killed 14 men? George explained calmly. Illinois state champion. 6-inch groups at 600 yards. 4-inch groups at 300 yards with the Lyman Alaskan. The commander gave him one night. Prove it at dawn. Or stop carrying it forever. George didn't sleep. He cleaned the rifle again and again, checking every screw, every mount, every round of .3006 ammunition. When the first weak light broke over Guadalcanal on January 22nd, George moved alone into the captured bunker overlooking the Point Cruz groves. No spotter, no backup, just his rifle, a canteen, and 60 rounds. At 9:17 a.m. A branch moved 87 feet up a banyan tree. There was no wind. George exhaled, adjusted 2 clicks right for wind. Steadied the trigger. Smooth. 3.2 pounds. Crack. The Japanese sniper fell from the branches, tumbling 90 feet to the ground. 1 shot, 1 kill. A century-old banyan tree swallowed the sound. By the end of that morning, George had killed 2 snipers. Word spread through the battalion like wildfire. The mail-order rifle worked, and the men who mocked him now watched in stunned silence. But the Japanese were watching, too, and they were learning. George had no idea that killing these first snipers would turn into a 4-day duel that would push him to the edge of death, test every skill he had ever learned, and carve his name quietly, without glory or ceremony, into the hidden history of sniper warfare. The jungle around Point Cruz was never truly silent. Birds shrieked. Insects droned. Distant artillery rumbled like a storm that never arrived. Inside the ruined Japanese bunker, John George lay still, letting the noise fade into the background. Noise didn't kill men. Movement did. He pressed his eye to the Lyman Alaskan scope. 2.5 power. Not much, but enough. Asterisk, he worked methodically. Tree by tree, left to right, top to bottom, dot asterisk every branch. Every shadow. Then he saw it. 87 feet up a banyan tree. 240 yards away, a branch shifted. There was no wind. George didn't rush. A careless shooter died fast in this jungle. He watched. The shape slowly resolved. Dark cloth. The curve of a helmet, a body wedged perfectly into the fork of 3 branches. The Japanese sniper faced east. Eyes on the supply trail where Americans moved ammunition, and water dot asterisk George made a tiny adjustment. 2 clicks right for wind. Exhale. Asterisk. Steady. Pressure on the trigger. The Winchester bucked. The sound cracked through the grove. Dot asterisk. Far away. The sniper's body jolted, then dropped. Asterisk. He hit every branch on the way down. A lifeless shape tumbling 90 feet to the jungle floor. Dot. One shot. One man who would never pull a trigger again. Asterisk George worked the bolt by reflex. Brass flew. A fresh round slid into the chamber. He didn't celebrate. There was no cheering in a sniper's work. If that man had been the shooter. His spotter was still alive, and spotters were often more dangerous than shooters. George searched again, widening his scan beyond the first tree. The banyans were massive, their limbs twisted into natural hiding places. The canopy created deep, shifting shadows that could conceal anything. Asterisk at 9:43 a.m. He found the second one. Asterisk, another tree 60 yards north of the first, maybe 50 feet up. This sniper was doing what George would have done, moving, climbing down the trunk, abandoning a compromised position. He had heard the shot. He knew the danger. George led the movement slightly, squeezed the trigger. Asterisk, the second sniper, fell backwards. His rifle clattering through branches ahead of him. 2 shots, 2 dead. Asterisk. The man in George's battalion had joked about his rifle for weeks. Asterisk that morning. The jokes stopped. By late morning, the duel escalated. Asterisk at 11:21. A Japanese round smashed into a sandbag 6 inches from George's head, spraying dirt into his face. He didn't move at first. Instinct said run. Training said wait. Asterisk, he rolled to the side, heart pounding, and began again, glass to the trees. This time scanning a new sector to the southwest. Whoever had fired at him had already moved. A competent sniper never stayed in one place after a shot. 17 long minutes passed. At 11:38, he saw him, asterisk third tree from the left in a tight cluster of 5 banyans. 73 feet up, tucked along a thick branch. The sniper had shifted to a different branch in the same tree, believing that change alone would be enough. Asterisk at W and single quotes T. George settled the crosshairs. Smooth trigger. The third sniper crumpled silently and dropped. By noon, John George had killed 5 Japanese snipers. Asterisk 5. Men who had terrorized the groves for days were now lying broken. At the roots of their own trees, word spread fast. Men from the 132nd, who had mocked his mail-order sweetheart, now drifted toward the bunker, wanting to watch him work. They had seen what those snipers could do, how they could turn a simple trip to a water source into a death sentence. Now they wanted to see the man who was sending. The fear back the other way. Asterisk George refused. Them. Spectators meant movement. Movement meant attention. Attention drew fire. He stayed. Alone. Asterisk all afternoon. He scanned the trees. Asterisk the jungle. Suddenly. Was quieter shots. The Japanese had adapted. No more shifting in the branches. No more repositioning in daylight. They stayed still. Buried deep in the canopy, waiting for another mistake. None came. At 1600 hours. George pulled back to battalion headquarters. Asterisk captain. Morris was waiting. The smirk was gone. The sarcasm was gone. He didn't call it a toy this time. He called it what? It had earned the right to be called a weapon. Morris wanted him back in that bunker at dawn. Asterisk. January 23rd opened with rain. Asterisk not a drizzle Guadalcanal rain. thick and violent, turning the ground into mud and the air into gray walls. The groves became a curtain of water. Beyond 100 yards, the world vanished. George sat in the bunker, waiting. Snipers love cover. Rain is cover. At 8:15, the rain began to ease. By 8:45, visibility stretched far enough for the game to resume. Asterisk at 9:12 a.m. He caught sight of the first sniper of the day. Asterisk. This one had climbed into position during the downpour. Smart. The thunder of the rain had hidden his movement. He'd chosen a tree 290 yards out farther than the previous day's shots. Asterisk. Even smarter. He was testing George's limits. George adjusted for distance. He didn't overthink it. Crosshairs steady, 1 measured breath. The sniper fell. 6 confirmed kills. Asterisk this time. The Japanese answered immediately. Asterisk at 9:57. Mortar rounds began to land around his bunker. The first salvo hit 40 yards short, throwing earth into the air. The second came 20 yards closer. George didn't wait for the third. He grabbed his rifle, sprinted along the tree line, and dove into a shell crater just as the third barrage slammed into the old bunker. The position he had used to dominate the groves for 2 days vanished in fire and flying debris. Asterisk, the Japanese had learned something too. Asterisk if he can't outshoot the sniper. Destroy the place he's shooting from. Asterisk George crawled out of the crater and moved 120 yards north, finding a new hide behind a fallen tree. The trunk gave him cover and a new angle into the groves. He settled in, wet, exhausted, but alive. The duel resumed that afternoon. He killed 2 more snipers, number 7 at 14:23, number 8 at 15:41. Nearly 94 feet up a banyan where the changing angle of the sun turned. Concealment into a glowing silhouette. Asterisk by 1700 hours. Captain Morris called him back. Asterisk 2. Days. 8 Japanese snipers dead. 12 rounds fired. Asterisk 4. Mrs. Asterisk intelligence had estimated 11 snipers operating in the point cruise. Groves. 8 were now corpses. 3 were still out there. Asterisk not. The reckless ones, not the impatient ones. The survivors, the careful ones. The snipers who had watched their comrades fall one by one. Asterisk, asterisk. The ones now studying him, asterisk, his angles, his positions, his habits. Asterisk that night in his tent. John George cleaned his Winchester for the 3rd time in as many days. Oil, patches, cosmoline residue. 5 fresh rounds slid into the magazine with a familiar metallic click. Asterisk he lay down. Closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Asterisk at 3 a.m. He gave up. Sleep wouldn't come. Rain began again at 4:15. Heavy. Relentless. Asterisk by 5:30. George already knew one thing. Asterisk if he wanted to survive the next day. He couldn't go back to the same place. Asterisk, the Japanese knew the bunker. They knew the fallen tree. They would be waiting, so he chose somewhere new. A cluster of rocks the Marines had once used as a machine gun nest. Elevated, protected, with overlapping fields of fire. Asterisk, the stage was set. Asterisk, 8 snipers were already dead. 3 remained. These last 3 weren't just hiding. Asterisk, they were hunting him back. Asterisk, asterisk, rain hammered the jungle at dawn on January 24th, turning Guadalcanal into a sheet of gray water. The groves were silent except for the roar of it, thick, heavy tropical rain that blurred the world beyond 50 yards. For George, the weather was both a curse and a gift. Snipers loved rain. Rain masked movement. Rain erased sound, which meant the remaining Japanese snipers had plenty of time to climb, settle, and hide before daylight. George didn't wait for perfect visibility. He crawled into position early, a new position, 50 yards south of his previous hide. A cluster of jagged rocks once used as a marine. Machine gun nest, elevated, concealed, overlapping views into the groves. Asterisk by 7:43 a.m. The rain thinned to a drizzle. Asterisk by 8:17. George was already scanning. No movement. No flashes of color. Just endless jungle. Then he saw something he didn't expect. Asterisk a Japanese sniper, barely 40 feet up in a palm tree. 190 yards away. Low. Too low. Asterisk Japanese snipers always climbed high for better lanes of fire. This one was crouched in front, barely above ground level. Odd position. Limited sight lines. And from George's elevated angle, it was almost too easy to spot him. Asterisk too. Easy. George froze. Something felt wrong. Asterisk the sniper. Wasn't acting like the others. Asterisk he. Wasn't hidden well. He wasn't positioned for advantage. He was positioned to be seen. Bait. George lowered the rifle slightly, widening his field of view. If this palm tree sniper was bait, the real shooter would be somewhere with a perfect view of the trap waiting for a muzzle flash. Waiting for George, he scanned the surrounding banyan trees, left to right, top to bottom, every branch, every shadow. 11 minutes passed. Asterisk then at 8:28. He found the real threat. Asterisk a banyan tree. 80 yards northwest of the palm. Asterisk 91 feet. Asterisk perfect concealment, branches and vines forming a natural. Blind. Asterisk perfect angle overlooking the fallen tree where George had been the previous day. Asterisk perfect kill zone aimed to shoot anyone firing at the decoy. This wasn't improvisation. This was a coordinated trap. Asterisk George had two options. 1. Shoot the real sniper first. But his muzzle flash would expose his position, giving the sniper a chance to relocate or shoot back. 2. Use the trap against them and gamble with his own life. Asterisk chose the gamble. George aimed at the bait sniper in the palm. Steady. Breath. Smooth trigger. Crack. Asterisk the decoy jerked and dropped. Instantly. Asterisk before the body hit the ground. George swung the rifle toward the banyan. He didn't need the full silhouette, just movement. And movement came exactly where he expected. A slight shift, head turning toward the sound. Instinctive. Fatal. George fired. Asterisk. The real sniper fell 90 feet, crashing through branches and vines. 2 shots. 2 kills. Asterisk a trap reversed. But George had paid a price. Those 2 shots loud. Clear, unmistakable, had given away his new position. Asterisk, and the Japanese weren't done. The counterattack. Asterisk at 8:34. A burst of machine gun fire ripped through the rocks where George had been sitting 6 seconds earlier. Bullets shattered stone, spraying dust and fragments everywhere. The Japanese had been watching. They had more than snipers in the groves. They had infantry support. Asterisk George slid into a drainage ditch, chest deep in water and mud. He crawled 40 yards to the east, slipping into another shell crater where water reached his shoulders. Asterisk he rested his rifle across the rim. Asterisk breathing. Slow, heart pounding, eyes scanning. 10 confirmed kills. 1 sniper left. Asterisk and the last sniper wouldn't be careless. He wouldn't climb high. He wouldn't expose himself. He would come hunting. Asterisk the 11th. Sniper. Asterisk George scanned the banyans again and again. No movement. No shape. No silhouette. Then at 9:47, he caught something in his peripheral vision. A faint shift. Not in a tree. On the jungle floor. Asterisk. A Japanese sniper was crawling toward George's previous position at the rock slough. Deliberate, using ferns and vines as cover. He was moving like a ghost through undergrowth, closing the distance with surgical precision. This wasn't a rogue sniper. This was a hunter. Asterisk. He advanced to within 40 yards of the rocks. Asterisk studied the ground, waited, listened. Asterisk. Then moved again. Asterisk George stayed submerged, only his eyes above the waterline. He couldn't take the shot. The crater rim blocked his angle. To fire, he'd have to ride, exposing himself. Asterisk. The sniper kept creeping forward. Asterisk 35 yards. 30, 25, George knew this was no accident. The sniper had watched yesterday's machine gun attack. He had seen George escape east. Now he was working the escape route backward, systematically hunting his position. Asterisk at 10:03. The sniper reached the rocks. Asterisk. He took position. Inside the old machine gun nest, facing east. Gun. Ready. Eyes searching. And his back was fully exposed. Asterisk a perfect shot. An easy shot. Too easy. George hesitated. This was no amateur. Asterisk. This was the last sniper. The survivor who had outlived all the others. Asterisk key. Wouldn't sit still in an exposed nest unless he was also asterisk George. Scanned again. Asterisk at 10:06. He found him asterisk a second Japanese soldier 70 yards northwest, hiding behind a fallen tree, motionless, watching the drainage ditch. His rifle aimed directly where George should have been. Hiding. Not one sniper left. 2. Asterisk working. Together, asterisk a shooter and a trap, a decoy and a killer. A team designed to flush George out. This wasn't a duel anymore. This was a chess match. And George was outnumbered. 2 snipers, not one. In the rocks, the decoy asterisk one behind the fallen tree, the real killer asterisk, both positioned perfectly to ambush anyone. Who took the obvious shot? Asterisk John George knew exactly. What would happen if he fired now? He'd hit one. The other would immediately triangulate the muzzle flash. Asterisk, and with a bolt-action rifle. George couldn't reload fast enough to fire. Twice before one of them put a bullet through his skull. He needed a different kind of weapon now. Not the Winchester, not the scope. He needed patience. Asterisk George sank lower into the muddy water until nothing. But his eyes and the top of his head were visible above the surface. The Winchester he held vertically. Keeping water out of the barrel. Asterisk, he didn't breathe deeply. He didn't shift. He didn't blink more than he had to. He waited. The sweep at 10:13. The decoy sniper in the rocks stood up. Asterisk. He had watched the drainage ditch for 10 minutes and seen nothing. Asterisk, he believed George had retreated farther east. Asterisk. He signaled with one hand. Asterisk, the second sniper. The one behind the fallen tree nodded and began moving. Both men now walked slowly east, parallel to each other, spaced 70 yards apart, sweeping the jungle like hounds tracking a wounded animal. Closer, closer. They passed directly beside the crater. Without even glancing in, Asterisk George's entire body was underwater, except for his eyes. Asterisk mud coated his uniform. Asterisk, his heartbeat seemed louder than the rain dripping from leaves. Asterisk, the 2 Japanese soldiers moved past his position, past the crater, past the trees. Their backs were to him. George rose, slowly, silently. Asterisk water pouring off him in streams. Asterisk, he brought the Winchester to his shoulder. Asterisk. The first sniper was 42 yards away. Asterisk, his rifle pointed in the wrong direction. Asterisk, he didn't even know. Death was behind him. George fired. The sniper dropped. Instantly. Asterisk, the second sniper spun. Rifle rising, but he was too late. Asterisk George worked the bolt, chambered another round, aimed, fired. The shot echoed through the grove. 2 shots, 2 bodies, 11 Japanese snipers dead in 3 days. George exhaled. Finally, he had cleared the grove, but he was wrong. The recovery team. Asterisk branches. Cracked. Boots thudded. Low voices rose in the distance. George froze. These weren't snipers. Asterisk, they were infantry. And more than a couple. Asterisk, he slid back down into the crater as Japanese voices grew louder. Angry. Urgent. Searching. At least 6 men. Maybe more. Asterisk, they found the first. Body. Shouted to each other. Moved to the second. More shouting. Then silence. Asterisk. Then footsteps. Coming toward George. They had found his tracks. Mud prints leading. from the rocks toward the crater. George braced himself. 5 rounds in the rifle. At least 6 enemies. All moving toward him. He had fought snipers before, but this would be different. This was a close-range fight with a bolt-action rifle. The first 3 at 10:31. A Japanese soldier stepped directly to the crater rim. He stared down. Their eyes met. George fired from the water. The soldier fell backward. Dead before he hit the ground. 2 more soldiers rushed to the rim. George worked the bolt under the surface. Difficult. Muddy. But he managed and fired again. And again, both soldiers fell. 3 dead in seconds. But more were coming. Shouts tore through the trees. Rifles cracked. Bullets slammed into the crater walls, kicking up dirt and water like explosions. George had 2 rounds left. He knew he couldn't stay. Breaking contact. He moved. He climbed out of the crater's north side and sprinted 20 yards before dropping behind a fallen log. Shots followed him. A wild, panicked fire aimed at Noyes. Not at a target. He pressed his cheek to the mud and scanned through the scope. 2 more infantrymen approached the crater. Rifles raised. George fired. The first soldier fell. The second dove behind a tree. Firing blindly. George had 1 round left. More voices. More footsteps. They were flanking him from the east. From the south. From the rear. George had no choice now. A sniper alone against a squad. Couldn't hold ground. He had already done the impossible. Now EET. Survive. He grabbed his rifle and ran. Branches tore at his uniform. Vines wrapped around his boots. Bullets snapped through the jungle like angry hornets. He ran for 90 seconds, long enough to escape the immediate kill zone before throwing himself into another shell crater. This one was dry. He stayed low, chest heaving, listening. The Japanese voices faded. They hadn't pursued. Instead, they regrouped around their dead. George checked the Winchester. Mud on the stock. Water in the trigger guard. 2 rounds left. He crawled out, stayed low, and began the long, quiet retreat toward American lines. The return at 11:30. He reached the American perimeter. A Marine challenged him. George identified himself and was escorted to battalion headquarters. Captain Morris wanted a report. George gave it. 11 snipers. 12 rounds. 11 confirmed kills. Plus 3 infantrymen. In the close-range fight, Morris told him to clean his rifle and rest. No missions tomorrow. The battalion was shifting east. The Point Cruz groves no longer needed hunting. They were clear because 1 man with a toy rifle did what an entire battalion could not. The Point Cruz groves were finally silent. No more shots from treetops. No more bodies dragged back at dawn. No more fear. But John George's work wasn't finished. At 1400 hours. Word reached him from division headquarters. The battalion commander wanted him immediately. George walked in, expecting criticism, maybe even reprimand. He had operated alone, fired more ammunition than authorized, and nearly died without backup. Instead. He found something else waiting for him. Respect. Colonel Ferry, commander of the regiment, stood with Captain Morris and another officer. Ferry wasted no time. He had 1 question. Can you train other men to do what you did? George didn't hesitate. Yes, but they need rifles with optics, and they need to already know how to shoot. Ferry nodded. He had planned for that. The Marines had left behind 14 Springfield rifles with unertl scopes. Long, precision optics far more powerful than George's Lyman Alaskan. In addition, Ferry had 40 men in the regiment who had qualified as expert marksmen before deployment. All they needed was a teacher. George said he would do it. with one condition. He wanted to keep his Winchester, very approved. The first sniper section asterisk on January 27. George assembled 40 soldiers at a makeshift firing range, 2 miles east of Henderson Field. These men had been labeled expert marksmen in basic training, but none of them had ever shot at a human being, let alone from concealment, let alone in jungle warfare. Asterisk George started with fundamentals. The things books couldn't teach. Asterisk breathing. Control trigger squeeze reading wind through trees. Asterisk building. Stable shooting platforms with whatever the jungle gave you. Roots, rocks, logs. Mud asterisk. The Springfield rifles were heavy to 11 pounds with scopes. Heavier than the Garand. Heavier even than George's Winchester. But their optics were powerful. The inertial scopes made distant shapes clear enough to identify faces. Asterisk for 3 straight days. Under rain, heat, and insects, George drilled the men. Asterisk 100. Yards 200 yards 300. Yards 400 yards stationary targets asterisk moving. Targets half hidden by vegetation. By January 30th, 32 of the 40. Men could consistently hit man-sized targets at 300 yards under field conditions. Asterisk George paired them into 16 two-man teams. 1 shooter, 1 spotter, with binoculars and a Garand asterisk. They were interchangeable. A spotter could become the shooter after each engagement. Both roles mattered equally. 1 watched, 1 fired. Both survived or died together, asterisk for the first time. An American infantry regiment had something resembling a true sniper unit. The first hunt asterisk on February 1st. George led his first 4 sniper teams into the jungle west of the Guadalcanal River, an area where scattered Japanese infantry were believed to still operate. Asterisk. This wasn't sniper versus sniper work. This was recon, ambush, asterisk, precision, elimination, deep jungle warfare. George paired himself with Corporal Hayes, a sharp-eyed spotter who trusted George completely. Asterisk at dawn. They set up high on a ridge overlooking a narrow trail. At 7:20 a.m., a Japanese soldier appeared, careful, cautious, watching the trees. Asterisk Hayes whispered. Asterisk confirmed target. George fired. 1 shot, 1 kill. The soldier didn't even fall forward. He simply folded into himself and dropped out asterisk 6 more times that day. George engaged Japanese infantry. 6 more kills. 7 shots. 1 missed due to wind. The other 3 teams delivered similar results. Asterisk by nightfall. 23 Japanese soldiers were confirmed dead. Not 1 American casualty. In a single day, George's makeshift sniper section did what larger patrols had struggled to accomplish for weeks. Asterisk. And division headquarters noticed. The kill count rises asterisk for the next 9 days. The sniper section operated continuously across western Guadalcanal, clearing trails, eliminating rear guards, asterisk protecting American patrols, asterisk ambushing Japanese stragglers, asterisk by February 9th. The new sniper section had achieved 74 confirmed kills, 0 American casualties in sniper operations, asterisk. The number could have been higher. Many bodies fell into thick terrain where confirmation wasn't possible. Asterisk. The battalion commander sent their records upward. Asterisk division headquarters responded with something rare. Official recognition. The United States Army did not yet have a formal sniper doctrine. No job title. No training program. No manual asterisk. But thanks to George and his Winchester Model 70, they now had something better. Proof. Long range. Precision shooters could change the outcome of a campaign. The wound asterisk on February 7th. While operating near the Tannenbaum River, Georgie's luck ran out. Asterisk, a Japanese rifleman hidden deep in brush, fired a single, well-placed round. It hit George in the left shoulder. The impact spun him sideways, knocking him into the mud. Blood ran into his uniform. Hayes dragged him to cover and summoned a corpsman. The medic worked fast. The bullet passed through muscle. No shattered bone, no artery damage. Serious, but survivable. George was carried to a field hospital near Henderson Field. He had been fighting for weeks without rest. Without sleep, without backup. Now he finally stopped. He watched the palm trees sway above him while medics stitched the wound closed. The doctor told him, "You'll live, but you're done for at least 3 weeks." George didn't argue. The next day, American forces pushed west, and on February 9th, they reached the far tip of Guadalcanal. Cape Esperance was empty. The Japanese had completed their evacuation. Overnight, the battle for Guadalcanal was over, and George had played a part in ending it, not with a company of men, not with a machine gun, not with artillery, but with one bolt-action rifle and the skill of a calm, quiet marksman who refused to leave his toy behind. John George lay in a cot at the Guadalcanal Field Hospital, his left shoulder wrapped in clean bandages. The wound throbbed with every heartbeat, but he was alive, and for the first time in months he was still. No banyan trees hiding snipers. No mortar. No jungle shadows shifting with danger, but rest never lasted long for men like him. While he healed, new orders filtered through the Pacific Command structure. The U.S. Army needed combat officers, men who had proven themselves under fire for a new, dangerous assignment. Something secret, something deep behind enemy lines, something in Burma. George didn't hesitate. He volunteered. The journey. West by March 1943. George boarded a transport ship leaving Guadalcanal, heading across the Pacific. His Winchester Model 70 was locked in a waterproof case in the ship's cargo hold. The Lyman Alaskan scope was wrapped carefully in oilcloth. He had no idea what waited for him. No details. No mission outline. Just 3 words. Long-range penetration operations. He knew enough to understand that meant one thing. The unit with nitrogen monoxide named the transport reached India on April 3rd. Hundreds of officers gathered in a humid briefing tent outside the rail depot. Dust, heat, and the smell of diesel hung in the air. A general stepped forward and explained the mission. A new American jungle strike force, 3,000 men total, modeled after the British Chindits. Specialists in long distance, behind the lines jungle warfare. At that moment, they had no official name. Soon, the world would know them as Merrill's Marauders. Officially, the 5,307th. Composite unit, George was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, though the Army had no formal sniper jobs. No doctrine, no official recognition. Everyone in command knew who George was. Colonel Ferry's report had followed him across the ocean. He was not just another officer. He was the marksman of Guadalcanal. His new role, a rifle platoon leader. Unofficially, a designated long-range precision shooter in the world's thickest jungle. Training for the impossible. Training began immediately. The terrain was brutal. Dense forests. Rivers choked with mud. Steep hills rising like walls. The heat was suffocating. Men collapsed just marching between stations. But this was a preview of Burma. George adapted fast. He also modified his equipment. Burma wasn't like fighting in the groves of Guadalcanal. Burma meant no supply lines, 60-pound. Tax weeks-long march mountains. Beyond mountains, 0 artillery support, 0. Vehicles, 0 comfort, every ounce mattered. George replaced the Lyman. Scope with a lighter Weaver 330. Key. Swapped his wooden stock for a light synthetic one. Key. Trimmed the rifle's weight by nearly a pound. A pound didn't sound like much until you carried it for 300 miles through jungle. The Winchester that followed him into Burma was lighter, faster, better. Balanced and still deadly at 600 yards. The Perfect tool for a man who had mastered its every quirk. The march begins asterisk. The marauders entered Burma in February 1944. The objective, capture the airfield at Myochina, a crucial supply line for Allied operations into China. Asterisk, the Japanese held the region with 4,000 troops. Entrenched in jungle and mountains the Allies believed were almost impossible to penetrate. Asterisk. But that's why the marauders existed, to go where no one else could. From day one, the march was torture. Mountains as steep as ladders, valleys filled with choking humidity, rivers with currents strong enough to drag mules away leeches, malaria, typhus, dysentery ambushes at dawn ambushes. At dusk, no rest, no clean water, no road, no vehicles, no evacuation, no easy days. Asterisk, the marauders walked 83 miles in the first week alone. Asterisk, they lost mules to broken legs, they lost men to fever, they lost weight, strength, and sleep, but they didn't lose ground. Asterisk, George's rifle speaks. Asterisk, George used his Winchester sparingly. Not because he couldn't hit targets, but because firing the rifle risked exposing their position. Asterisk, when he did pull the trigger, it mattered. Asterisk against the Japanese officer directing forces at a river, crossing minus 412 yards. Asterisk against a machine gun nest pinning a squad down minus 380 yards. Asterisk against a Japanese sniper who thought he could outshoot the American with the mail order rifle. 290 yards. Asterisk 3 shots, 3 kills, no misses. Asterisk, he never fired. Twice. Asterisk, he never stayed in one place after. Shooting. Asterisk, he took 1 life, changed 1 battle, then vanished into the trees before the Japanese knew what happened. Asterisk, the marauders' mission was not to fight long battles. Asterisk, it was to strike, slip away, and keep moving. George fit that mission perfectly. The cost of Burma by May. The marauders had marched over 700 miles. Asterisk, they fought 12 major engagements and dozens of skirmishes. Asterisk, but the enemy wasn't always Japanese. Malaria, dysentery, typhus, heat, exhaustion, starvation, dehydration. Asterisk, disease hit harder than bullets. Asterisk, the unit that entered Burma with over 5,300 men was reduced to fewer than 3,000. Effective by the time they neared Myochina. Asterisk, the men's faces were gaunt. Their uniforms hung off them like rags. Their boots were ruined, their feet infected, their bodies hollowed by fever, and still they marched. The capture of Myochina on May 17th. After months of suffering that defied imagination, the marauders captured Myochina airfield, the strategic prize of northern Burma. The mission was a success. The cost was devastating. The unit was shattered. The men, including George, were no longer combat effective. Their bodies simply couldn't endure another day of jungle war. Asterisk. George had fired his Winchester only 7 times in 3 months. Asterisk, not because he couldn't find targets. Asterisk, but because Burmese combat was so close, so chaotic, so suffocating, that a long-range rifle was rarely needed. Asterisk, Burma taught George something new. The future of war was changing. The end of a campaign by June 1944. George was evacuated, the surviving marauders. He had survived Guadalcanal, survived the sniper duels at Point Cruz, survived Burma's mountains. Disease and starvation, asterisk, survived. Close-range ambush survived the march to Myochina. He left with his rifle, the same Winchester that had followed him from Illinois through the worst jungles on earth. Asterisk, but he also left with a realization. Asterisk, days alone. Marksmen in the jungle were fading. Asterisk, the modern battlefield would belong to semi-automatic rifles, radios, logistics, and combined arms. Yet none of that erased what he had accomplished. A single man, alone with a bolt-action rifle, had changed the course of 2 campaigns. Asterisk, by the summer of 1944. The Burma campaign was over. The marauders were disbanded. The survivors, thin, sick, exhausted, were scattered into hospitals and rear area assignments. Asterisk John George returned to the United States that July, carrying with him a wounded shoulder, a battered uniform, asterisk, a Winchester rifle that had changed the course of battles, asterisk, and memories he would not speak of for years, asterisk. The Army promoted him to captain and assigned him to Fort Benning, Georgia, the home of American infantry training. His new mission was no longer fighting. It was teaching. The teacher of war, asterisk, at Fort Benning. George trained young infantry officers in marksmanship, fieldcraft, asterisk, small unit, tactics, asterisk, and the harsh realities of jungle. Warfare, asterisk, he taught them what Guadalcanal had taught him, asterisk, that patience was deadlier than speed, asterisk. That one steady shot mattered more than 100 panicked ones, asterisk. That concealment saved more lives than courage, asterisk. That a soldier who understood terrain controlled the outcome, asterisk. That fear was natural, and mastering it was a skill. He taught them what Burma had taught him. At the jungle was not a battlefield, but an enemy. Itself, asterisk, that survival often depended on discipline, not firepower, that a man with a rifle and no supply line could still be a weapon. The officers who trained under him never knew the true weight of the lessons. Asterisk, George rarely talked about his own battles. He spoke calmly, methodically, almost academically. He taught war like a professor, not a killer. The Winchester goes quiet, asterisk. George kept his Winchester Model 70, the rifle that had killed snipers in banyan trees, asterisk, the rifle that survived rain, mud, and mortar fire, asterisk, the rifle that traveled to Burma, India, and back across the Pacific, asterisk. Now it sat silent, kept inside a heavy footlocker in his quarters. George rarely opened it. The world was changing. Asterisk. The Pacific Islands were falling to American forces. Europe was pushing toward victory. Modern rifles were rolling off assembly lines. Asterisk. Sniping was still unofficial, unstandardized. And UNCE, ERATED, dot asterisk, the kind of solitary precision that George embodied belonged to an earlier moment. A moment that was already fading. He understood that, and he accepted it. Asterisk. The return to civilian life, asterisk, in January 1947. After a decade of service, George was discharged from the U.S. Army. Asterisk. He left with, asterisk, the rank of lieutenant. Colonel, 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, a combat infantry badge, and a lifetime of knowledge that few men shared and fewer understood, asterisk. He returned home to Illinois and decided to start over. Asterisk, using the GI Bill, he enrolled at Princeton University, studying politics. His discipline and focus, shaped by combat, served him well. Asterisk. He graduated with highest honors in 1950. Then he spent 4 years at Oxford, studying modern politics, asterisk 4. More years in British East Africa, researching governmental structures, asterisk, and eventually moved to Washington, D.C., where he became executive director of African American Relations, later a consultant and lecturer for the State Department's Foreign Affairs Institute, asterisk. He built a scholarly career, a diplomatic life, a calm existence. People knew he'd served in the Pacific, but they didn't know the truth, asterisk. They didn't know about Point Cruz. They didn't know about the snipers. They didn't know about the 11 bodies falling from banyan trees, asterisk. They didn't know about the rifle he kept locked away. He never bragged. He never embellished. He never even volunteered the stories. He had seen enough war for a lifetime. The book Nitrogen Monoxide won expected, asterisk, in 1947. Before Princeton. Before Oxford, George made a quiet decision. Asterisk, he sat down to write. Not a memoir, not a tale of heroism, a record, a technical, clinical, detail-driven account of weapons, tactics, asterisk, jungle realities, psychology. He wrote for 6 months, filling more than 400 pages. Asterisk, a friend from the National Rifle Association read the manuscript and insisted it needed to be published. George disagreed. Who would care? It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, it wasn't a hero story, but it was accurate, perhaps the most accurate, unromantic depiction of small arms combat in the Pacific. So he allowed it. The book was published as Asterisk Shots Fired in Anger, 1947. Asterisk, it became a cult classic among historians, sniper instructors, firearms collectors, military theorists, Asterisk for decades. It remained one of the most respected first-hand accounts of sniper combat in World War II. There was no glorification, no bravado, no mythology, just facts. Brutal, honest, and precise. The way George lived, the way he fought, the way he taught. The quiet years. George lived to witness the next three American wars. Korea, Vietnam, asterisk. The Gulf War. He watched rifles evolve from M1 Garands to M14s to M16s. To the birth of modern sniper rifles, asterisk, he watched sniping become a formal specialty. A trained discipline, a respected profession, a critical component of modern warfare, asterisk, everything. He learned the hard way, alone in drowned jungles and muddy craters, became doctrine. George lived long enough to see his lessons become standard. But he never claimed credit. He wasn't looking for it. He had done what needed to be done. And he left the battlefield behind. John George lived a long, full life, nearly 9 decades. Asterisk, but the part of him forged in jungle mud and rifle smoke never left completely. Asterisk, it stayed locked inside a footlocker in his home, wrapped in oiled cloth and memories he almost never spoke aloud. Asterisk, the Winchester Model 70, asterisk, a civilian hunting rifle purchased with 2 years of National Guard pay. Mocked by officers, ignored by quartermasters, asterisk dismissed as a toy. Asterisk, and yet it became one of the most effective single weapons in the Pacific War. Asterisk, long after George traded uniforms for university halls. Asterisk, long after he studied at Princeton and Oxford. Asterisk, long after he became a diplomat, a lecturer, a mentor. Asterisk, the rifle remained with him. Not as a trophy, not as a symbol. Asterisk, but as an artifact of a life he had already buried. The final way he asked George, never chase fame. He never marched in parades. He never sat for interviews or wrote dramatic accounts of his battles. He preferred quiet, working in Washington, teaching African politics, analyzing the growth of new nations. His colleagues respected him deeply. Many admired his intellect. Asterisk. Few knew they worked alongside a man who once moved through trees like a shadow. A man who hunted snipers the way snipers hunted him. Asterisk. He didn't hide it out of shame. Asterisk. He hid it because he knew exactly what it cost. The Last Sunset, asterisk, on January 3rd, 2009. John George passed away at 90 years old. A soldier, a marksman, a professor, a diplomat. Historian. Asterisk, a man who survived 2 of the most unforgiving jungles on Earth and reshaped the American understanding of precision warfare, quietly, without ceremony. His children, family, and friends packed his belongings, and in the footlocker, they found the Winchester, scratched, faded, asterisk weathered by rain, mud and time, but still intact, still functional, still deadly. The rifle finds a home, George's. The rifle was donated to the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia. Asterisk, it sits behind a glass panel today, resting on a simple wooden rack. Next to it is a small placard summarizing its service. Most visitors walk by without stopping. To them, it looks like any other vintage bolt-action rifle, asterisk plain walnut stock, worn bluing, an old Weaver scope. They don't see the sniper who fell 90 feet from a banyan tree, asterisk. The rain-soaked duels in the groves of Guadalcanal, asterisk. The 12 rounds that killed 11 snipers, asterisk. The water-filled crater where George rose to save his own life, asterisk. The Japanese infantryman who nearly surrounded him, the Burr Mountains where he carried it for hundreds of miles. The precision shots that broke ambushes and saved patrols, asterisk, the beginnings of America's first modern sniper doctrine, asterisk. The man who taught a generation of soldiers how to shoot, survive, and outthink the enemy, asterisk, but the rifle remembers. Every scratch is a landmark. Every dent is a chapter. Every worn patch is a story of survival. Asterisk. The legacy asterisk John George didn't seek glory. He didn't write for praise. He didn't claim to be a hero, but what he did mattered. He proved that a single calm man with a precision rifle can change a battlefield. Skill can overcome fear. Patience can defeat numbers one. Steady shot can save dozens of lives. Accuracy matters more than firepower. Training matters more than equipment asterisk. Courage is quiet, disciplined, and deadly asterisk. His book, Shots Fired in Anger, is still studied by military instructors, firearm enthusiasts, and historians. It remains one of the clearest windows into the brutal simplicity of jungle warfare and the mind of a marksman who fought without fanfare. Asterisk. And his Winchester, his mail-order sweetheart, stands today as a silent witness to all of it. The final word George once wrote, greater than the jungle does not reward bravery. Asterisk, it rewards discipline. Judgment and patience, asterisk, bravery only gets you killed faster. His life proved the truth of that, because John George didn't survive by being fearless. He survived by being precise.